I worked on the Fort Baker side of the Golden Gate Bridge opposite the Presidio in San Francisco. On condition of anonymity, you can call me David. Both incidents occurred while I was in military police. Both occurred on abandoned military installations on the West Coast. I could provide my DD-214. Also, as an MP, I was always with a partner. Two-man cars in those days, so my partner also witnessed to everything I saw. But unfortunately for this purpose, I have lost touch with him. It's now been almost 45 years. The Presidio of San Francisco on the south end of Golden Gate Bridge, opposite the Marin headlands across the waters of the open Pacific Ocean that flow from the west into the San Francisco Bay, was the oldest Army installation operating in the American West. During World War II, the Presidio was the central Army operations in defense of the western U.S. The open Pacific Ocean is on the left. Now myself, or David, at age 24, was a U.S. Army specialist for the military police in 1968. Now, I'm 72, retired, and I was a U.S. Army specialist, and I had my patrol car patrolling those three forts, Baker, Berry, and Cronkite. That's about a 20-mile area, and back in those days, there was a building that was a research unit. I never had access to it, so I don't know what they did in there. It was a 2-story military-type building, and it was very, very close. I'd say within 50 yards of the bay. The main installation was like a Nike Hercules missile site, and in those days, the Nike Hercules missile sites were the primary defense weaponry that we had. Overlooking the launch site at the former U.S. Army's Fort Berry with Fort Cronkite visible across Rodeo Lagoon. There were 6 Nike Hercules missile sites distributed among the 3 Army forts. Nike Site SF-88L. SF-88 is a former Nike missile launch site at Fort Berry, in the Marin headlands to the north of San Francisco, California. The site was originally armed with Nike Ajax missiles, and modifications were made to the site in 1958 to allow it to also be armed with Nike Hercules. And I think there were about 6 of those installations at various parts around this bay. The one that I had all my contact with first was Fort Baker, and those were restricted areas. I don't have access to the Nike sites. They had their own security there all the time. On military patrol at Fort Baker, the incident that I want to tell you about happened 25 miles an hour in our car, and I was close to that research unit that I mentioned. The water from the San Francisco Bay was probably from the road that I was on, and was about 20 feet from the road. As I was driving along the dark, I saw something in my rearview mirror. I turned around, and as I did, I applied the brakes. Now, when I applied the brakes, it lit the thing up, and it was definitely a humanoid form. The only way I can describe it is if you saw the movie Creature from the Black Lagoon, from the 1954 Hollywood film. It was very, very close to that. Very close. The head was a bit small, but the overall form was very close to that creature, and it did come out of the water and then stood on the road. The creature stood there for maybe 5 seconds, or at the most 10. And it just took off. I could see it run, but it ran not back into the water, but towards the cliff that was there. There was a sheer cliff there that it ran against and then just disappeared. We were both shaken, but to be honest with you, we didn't know what to do. We both saw this thing, and we saw it run into the cliff, and I said, well, we've got to get back and check it out. He was hesitant, and I was a little too, but we were armed, and so we went back there. I stood exactly where it had been standing. I looked at the cliff. There's nothing but a cliff there. The research station that I was telling you about that was close was about, I'd say maybe a quarter mile down the road, not where the cliff is. There was nothing there but the cliff. I can't imagine anybody being able to climb it either. It's a sheer, smooth rock face, just like a wall. Anyway, so when we went back there, it had completely disappeared somehow, and I have no explanation at all. That is just something that is etched in my mind forever, and I'm sure I'll never have an explanation. So, the first encounter I recall was in 1985 or 1986. I was around 7 or 8. It was summertime. late in the day too, so around dusk. Not full daylight, but not dark out yet either. I was in my front yard playing catch with my cousin, and the ball went past me and down the side of my house into the backyard. The yard was surrounded by a chain-link fence that separated the yard from an old overgrown alley that was used as a road at one time. When I went to retrieve the ball, I noticed some rustling in the brush. At the time, I was thinking it was a cat or a squirrel or something like that. But as I got closer, I noticed something moving very close to the fence. I thought it was a man at first. It was as big as a man, but it was covered in brownish hair. From what I could see, its head was absolutely canine. It had the snout, the ears, etc. But it had human-like hands. I couldn't really see the lower half of the body due to the weeds and grass, but it appeared to be injured in some way, just from the way it was moving. It was using the fence to drag its way down the alley, hand over hand, just pulling itself. I stood and watched for what seemed like a long time, but in reality it was probably only a minute or two, before running up to get my cousin. Of course, I told him I'd seen a monster in the alley, and we excitedly talked about it before getting up the courage to go back and look. Of course, by the time we got back there, it was long gone, leaving no trace other than some smashed down grass. I didn't think about it again for a very long time. Flash forward to sophomore year of high school, so this was 1994 now. I'm 16. I get home and head to my bedroom for a nap. I was meeting some friends back at the school later to see a football game or something like that. So I wake up and it's dark in my room. The only light coming is from the hallway because my door is open several inches. As my eyes adjust, I realize I'm not alone. There are literally 4 or 5 of these creatures in my room watching me. They are all 6 feet or taller, covered in dark hair with canine facial features. Just watching. They didn't move toward me. They don't communicate. Nothing. They did nothing. So I'm thinking to myself that I must be dreaming. I lay there for a bit, squeezing my eyes closed, and when I reopen them, the creatures are gone. I convince myself it was a dream, and I go about my night. Next time it happens is about 2005, so now I'm 27. Sometimes after dark, some friends would meet at a local restaurant for drinks and food. I didn't work that night, so my boyfriend and I headed up to meet them. Nothing out of the ordinary happened. On the way home, my boyfriend was chatting about the day and what we're going to do that weekend. I noticed something ahead in the road, and so I slow slightly. I'm thinking it may be a bag or some garbage or something, but as we get closer, I notice it looks more like an animal. At this point, we are both silent, and I'm almost at a complete stop. The creature stands up on hind legs, and now I see that it is humanoid with canine features. It slowly turns its head towards us and then just kind of drifts away. It didn't run, it was just no longer there. Hard to explain. I made sure I asked my boyfriend to tell me exactly what he saw before I even said what I saw. I wanted to make sure we had seen the same thing, but he did describe to me exactly what I saw. And that was the last major encounter I had. My little sister Tilly died when she was 8. It was an accident. A horrible, tragic accident. Nothing to be done, the police always said. But that isn't really true. There's a lot we could have done. Mom asked Dad to watch Tilly while she played a game with me. I'd been upset, you see, and the weeks prior most of their attention was on her upcoming ballet recital. She was always so bright and talented, and I was jealous. So Mom had scheduled some mother-daughter time, just the 2 of us. The issue is, Dad had me mow the lawn. He'd already planned it in his day, so he sat Tilly on the deck and gave her his phone, hoping it would just keep her occupied. He should have known better. She was always such an adventurous child. And the second Dad's back was turned, she was off, phone abandoned in her wake. From what they can guess, they think she was looking for a ball under the house. It was one we'd lost months before, glittery and pink and insanely bouncy, so I guess it does make sense that she'd have gone after it. Our parents had blocked the way in there when we were little, but I guess the boards must have broke, or Tilly must have just squeezed through the gap. Either way, she got in, walking through the dark, unstable area. And she fell. It was ruled that she died from head trauma, most likely from a rock. When I was younger, they told me she died instantly. It wasn't until I was much older that I learned that wasn't true. They think Tilly lay there for 4, maybe 5 minutes crying for help as she died. Crying with everything in her little body, but it wasn't loud enough to get past Dad's lawnmower. By the time he noticed she was gone, it would have already been too late. Not that he knew it. We spent days looking for her. We got the police involved immediately, but no one found the body until we noticed a smell. God, that smell. I do still remember it. Once you've smelled your baby sister rotting beneath floorboards, you don't forget it. Years later, a rat died in the attic, and the smell alone sent the whole family out into the yard, just sobbing like babies. Her funeral was just a blur. I kept thinking that it couldn't be real, that Tilly would be at my side in the second row, just asking me to play with her. They didn't even let me see her, since her body was pretty bad by the time they found it. They said she was covered in spiders and worms and just other horrible things. I think that's part of why I had such a hard time moving past it all, just because I never got to say goodbye. I guess I should have known it couldn't end like that. Amazingly though, Mom and Dad stayed together, took a lot of counseling and a stint or two into alcoholism, but I think they wanted to protect me. My childhood was already ruined without hearing my parents scream at each other in the kitchen. I've seen so many therapists that I stopped keeping track a long time ago. We didn't even move out of the house, even though we should have. We did get the underneath boarded professionally, though. None of us wanted to see it anymore. Too many horrible memories. I moved out as soon as I could. I loved my parents, I really did, but I hated that house. It just felt like a constant reminder that I'd killed my little sister. Now, I didn't kill her, and that's what everyone says. It's just the guilt talking. The guilt that she ran off because of me. Mom wasn't watching her because Mom was with me, and because of that, Tilly fell into that pit. If I hadn't been so jealous and selfish, my sister would still be alive. That's what I used to think anyway. I've worked through that now, mostly, and after years and years of therapy and blaming every person under the sun, blamed my mom for not checking on her, Dad for looking away, the police for not finding her sooner, and all of us just for not hearing her cry. And my sweet, stupid sister who ran under the house for a bouncy ball. Poor sister. Either way, that's just background. Now that I've filled you in on everything, I really should explain what happened next. My parents hadn't picked up the phone in a while. On its own, that wasn't too surprising. They're busy people. Usually have their entire day planned out to a T. A call from their daughter might not work with the schedule. What really tipped me off, though, was the neighbors. As a kid, I used to be friends with one of our neighbors' kids, a boy named James. We were never especially close, but we did play together, as you do when you live close by, and when we grew up, we kept in touch. He still has my number, and crucially, he still lives next door. So when my parents stopped collecting their mail and didn't answer the door, naturally he called me. Honestly, he should have just called the police. Why he rang me from half a state away is anyone's guess, but he was never really the smartest, I suppose. And when I was about 16, I actually found it really endearing. Kind of sexy, maybe. I guess I have a thing for himbos, so sue me. But I'm getting off topic. I came home to check on my parents. I actually wasn't too worried. It would hardly be the first time they planned a trip without telling me, to let the neighbors know they weren't dead on the ground somewhere. But I just figured they weren't home, and I'd let myself in with a spare key and just hang out for a few days. Maybe do some cleaning. God knows they would have needed it. But that is not what happened. As soon as I get there, I started to feel, I felt weird. All the hairs on my neck stood on end, and a knot in my stomach formed, one that grew stronger with each step up the mottled stone path. Every part of me screamed to run, but I thought it was ridiculous. I drove all this way, of course I'm going inside. I took the spare key from under the kissing gnomes and let myself into my childhood home. I wiped my feet on the scuffed welcome mat and made my way into the hallway. And then that smell hit me. It was so bad it made my eyes burn, so excruciatingly familiar, so painfully sweet it could peel paint from the walls. I gagged, vision spinning, and I had to put a hand on the wall just to stabilize myself. Now, with panic setting in, I ran up the hall, checking each room with growing urgency, all while shouting for my parents, for my mom and dad, who I loved so much despite everything. The walls grew increasingly white, lathered in silky white threads I now know were webs. I barely noticed at the time. Panic had all my thoughts taken away until the only thing I knew was the desperate slamming of my own heart. And then I found them. Their room was a mess of webs. It was all over the walls, all over the floor, all over them. They lay still and lifeless on their bed, knives in each other's chests, stiff hands still gripped together in one final gesture of love. Spiders crawled their bodies, spinning homes in their rotting flesh and unwashed hair, and their eyes were covered in a pale, glistening film. All of the breath was knocked from me. I couldn't even scream. I just stood there, mouth agape, as tears filled my eyes and the smell filled my nose in such a noxious wave it sent me gagging. I stumbled out of the room and fell to the floor, sobbing my heart out. I think I could have stayed there forever, broken and scared on the floor, if I hadn't felt her hand on my shoulder. The hand was small and soft, and somehow I knew exactly who it was before I even looked up. It was Tilly. She stood there wearing the same clothes as the day she disappeared. Smile bright and cheery. Felt so wrong against this backdrop. She wasn't meant to be here, no matter how much my whole body leapt at seeing my baby sister again. "Hi, Anna," she said in her sweet, childlike voice. "I'm so happy you're here. I missed you." She hugged me, and her body felt stiff and unyielding. "Tilly," I didn't know what to say. So I said, "Mom and Dad, did you hurt them?" Her face fell. They hurt themselves. I couldn't save them. She looked so sad and confused when she said, "Why couldn't I save them?" How are you here?" She smiled, and I saw that gap between her front tooth, the one Mom always promised would shrink as she got older. "This is home, silly." "But you're dead," she giggled. "It's still home, and my room's still here." It was true. My parents never cleared out her room. They just abandoned it. All her toys and drawings and clothes were still in there. And apparently so was she. She looked exactly the same. It was like I was transported back to my childhood, like nothing ever happened. No matter how wrong it was, it did make me happy. I hadn't realized just how much I'd missed her until I saw her face again. "Tilly, I'm so sorry," came out. I couldn't help it, I had to say it. I hadn't realized how much I'd been carrying it. It turns out all the crap about having moved past it and not blaming myself really was one big lie. "I'm so sorry." "Why?" she frowned. Now that threw me. I'd imagined talking to my sister hundreds of times, maybe thousands. And I'd imagined her yelling, like she had when we used to argue, or maybe crying, like when things didn't go her way, or something. Anything but a complete lack of understanding as to why I'd feel guilty. We didn't save you. You were alone, and I'm so sorry." At that point, I was sobbing uncontrollably. I sobbed for my parents and for Tilly and for myself, because I think I knew then and there that I was never going to leave this house. I could feel spiders crawling up my legs and weaving webs and tying me sweetly to the floor. They don't want me to go. Tilly gave me another hug, and this time I hugged her back, ignoring the chill of her skin. "Oh, Anna, it's okay. Everything's okay now. I forgave you all ages ago," she giggled. "Now, it's my go to protect you." "Protect me? Tilly, protect me from what?" I kept saying her name every other sentence, like maybe if I kept saying it, it would make her more real. From everything. It's scary out here, Anna. I was scared when you weren't here. What if you got hurt? What if you died? She sniffled, hugging me once again. And Mom and Dad? They weren't happy to see me. They kept yelling so loudly and crying, and it was scary. I don't like it when Mommy and Daddy yell. She tugged on one of her dark braids. I remembered Mom plaiting it that day, kissing Tilly's head and calling her beautiful. Now Mom was lying dead, covered in spiders. The thought made my stomach turn. It still does, even as I write this now. And that goddamn smell. They weren't happy to see me, she repeated. But you are, right, Anna? You're happy to see me, aren't you? Of course, I said without thinking, without even feeling it. I missed you. I missed you so much. It was true. Of course it was. And even now, I don't regret seeing her again. This had to happen. I just wish... I don't know. I wish things had gone differently. I missed you too. You weren't here, and I wanted you to come home, and here you are. Came another hug. I felt something shift under her skin. I was here for years. Why are you here now? It didn't make sense to me. There didn't seem to be a reason. Honestly, I wish I didn't know the reason, and I wish I didn't know it now. My friends weren't ready to meet you, she explained. They wanted it to be perfect. Friends. She nodded enthusiastically. Something about it was off, something I only later identified. When my sister nodded at me, she had too many eyes, the soft outlines of smaller ones against her forehead. I didn't know what it was at the time. It happened too quickly, and I thought I was seeing things because when I looked back, she was normal again, beaming at me like she had some incredible gift for me. In her mind, she probably thought she did. Come on, I'll show you, she told me, holding a hand out like she was going to help me up, and like an idiot, I took it. She actually did pull me up. Apparently, she isn't bound by laws like physics or biology anymore. I bet she gets a thrill out of that. She never liked rules. I was shocked into silence for a second, but Tilly didn't mind. She just pulled me up until we stood in front of her bedroom door. My stomach twisted instinctively. That door. God, that door. How many times I've walked past that damn thing in all the years I'd lived here. How many times have I seen it, seen the drawing stuck to it, the green pen below the handle, felt that loss all over again? How many times has it reopened old wounds? However many times, I guess it wanted to add a few more to its list. There was a strange smell coming from inside. Even as I write this, I can still smell it. It's musty, like an old storage cupboard left unopened. Musty and also acidic, like the smell of ants, except several times worse. I hadn't noticed it until then, thanks to the ever-present stench of decay. That's actually why I'm sitting by the door, so I don't have to smell the bodies. Tilly gripped the door handle and cracked it open. The smell was so strong it made my already watery eyes burn. My sister slipped inside, dragging me in with her. I gasped so hard I coughed, but that was the least of my worries, because inside my sister's room was web everywhere, along the walls, in the furnishings, on the floor, and on the roof. In the far corner was a massive sack of webbing. Picture a hammock. Now picture it made of webs, except that's not quite right. Alright, how about this? Picture two hammocks glued to each other, full of blankets made of webs, and smelling like ass. Now you have at least a half-decent idea of what I was looking at. It was right above Tilly's bed. I could see one of her glow-in-the-dark stars stuck behind it. And then there were the spiders. So many spiders. They're everywhere in there, on the walls, the floor, the furniture, and I could hear them. There were so many spiders I could hear them as they scuttled along the ground. I retched again, recoiling, but Tilly pulled me inside with that unnatural strength of hers. "No," I choked out. "God, no." Tilly frowned at that, like I was the one who'd done something wrong. "Don't be mean, Anna. These are my friends. They want to meet you." I pulled away from her grip and made for the door, but she snatched me right back into her arms, crying out like I was the unreasonable one. I felt the spiders start to crawl up my legs, and I kicked and flailed, trying desperately to free myself, all while my little sister held me down. And then, alright, I'm not proud of this. Of course I'm not. Spiders or no spiders, she's still my baby sister. I love her. I would never intentionally hurt her, but I kicked her in the chest. I didn't mean to. Of course I didn't, but it worked anyway. Her grip loosened, more out of shock than pain, I think, and I took my opportunity. Within seconds, I was out the door and down the hall, running for the nearest exit, which was the back door. Tilly ran after me, yelling my name. Spiders pulled after her. She kept saying how much fun we'd have, how we could be sisters again, that it wasn't scary for very long. Her voice sounded so sweet, so genuine, that I almost believed her. But still, I ran, and I almost made it too. I made it all the way to the door. The issue was the lock. The sliding door had a badly made latch, one that got worse every year as it rusted. It was secure enough to leave alone, but sometimes it'd get stuck and you'd have to jiggle it a little. When Tilly and I were little, we used to have to ask Mom and Dad to open it for us. Eventually, I got strong enough to force it, but it takes a minute or two, and that's exactly what I didn't have. I tugged and jiggled the lock desperately. I begged it to open, just open, but the stupid thing was jammed to hell. I glanced behind me as Tilly and her spiders came running up towards me. But she looked wrong. Almost gelatinous in places, skin warping and strange lumps forming under her skin. I had an awful, awful feeling it was spiders, but Tilly didn't look bothered by it. In fact, she still looked happy, and that was almost worse somehow. But I knew if she caught me, she'd fill me full of them. I knew why Mom and Dad had killed themselves. I'm not ashamed to admit that at that point, I started praying to every god to ever be conceived of, still desperately jiggling the hatch. My heart and head pounded, and my breath came in sudden gasps. The lumps got bigger, and I pressed against the glass in mute horror as 4 long, spindly legs burst from my baby sister's back, and her human legs just stretched to match. Her body was warping and shaking like jelly in the breeze, expanding and distorting until the only recognizable bits were just from the waist up. She called out to me in that same sweet voice, and I could finally speak again, even if only just to beg for my life. "We're not gonna hurt you, silly." She looked so hurt. As she spoke, I saw long, sharp fangs behind her lips. "We want to keep you safe. It's scary out there, Anna. We just want to protect you." "Tilly," I said. "Tilly, I'm sorry. I forgive you," she told me. "I love you, so I'm going to keep you safe. We're never going to be alone. Not like I was." Now, she didn't say that last part, but she didn't have to. She didn't have to say that she was the one alone. It echoed off the thin, webbed walls louder than words ever could have. "I'm sorry," I said again, and the latch finally gave way. I threw the door open, feeling the sunlight on my skin. My lips parted into a scream, and she grabbed me. Her webs went around my mouth before I could get out even a single sound, like thick silver. They stuck to my tongue as more of them curled around my arms, pulling me back inside. I thrashed and screamed and cried, but she never let up, dragging me backwards until we were back in her room, door stuck shut. She looked so hurt when she looked at me. She saw how scared I was, and she was insulted by it, I think. "You shouldn't run away," she told me. "You could have been hurt." "Please," I begged. "Please let me go." She shook her head. "You're gonna like it, Anna," she told me, smiling that fanged smile. "I promise. It won't hurt for long, okay?" I shook my head over and over, but it didn't make a difference. The spiders crawled up my body towards my head, and no amount of struggling could help me. They poured into my nose and mouth and eyes until I was choking on them. And still my sister watched, holding me perfectly still, with long, pale strings of web. It did hurt. It hurt a lot. A strange, itching kind of pain. It still does, actually. But I think I'm getting used to that thought by now. This is the point when I woke up. I truly believed it was all just a dream. Some type of psychological nightmare. And that's also when the phone rang. Found out my parents had actually killed themselves in the way that I had dreamt. Still, to this day, I wonder if maybe there was more. Perhaps Tilly did come back. Perhaps that I was right and that is what happened. Tilly and her spiders.